So today, of course, you all know we're talking about the challenges of diversity in the workplace and the tech industry. Um, with everything that's happening in the news, with social injustice and inequality, I think being inclusive should be at the forefront of everyone's mind. So with that being said, today we're going to talk about the loose framework of the panel is tech, where it's been, where it is, and where it should be going. So I want to do just like a brief introduction of the panel. So on the far end, we have Stephen Ruiz. He's the founder of the Silicon Beach Diversity Meetup. He has 15 years of experience in UE, which is user experience, and UX. Oh, my bad. And and digital strategy. He has made it a point to champion for women and minorities in the tech industry. So I just want to start. I know I did like a brief background of you, but I want to get your point of view. If you could start with your backgrounds and then let us know how you define diversity.
Sure, I can, whoa, little echo there. So I'll go ahead and get started. In my experience, I come from a design background, user experience design, information architecture, user interface design. And I think, in my field in particular, I've been doing this for over 15 years. And in my field in particular, I think there is kind of a natural inclination to want to be empathetic towards people, to want to be, to understand what the process looks like for people that are engaged in what you're designing and what that process looks like. For myself, my trajectory started in Silicon Valley back in the late 90s. The first company that I worked for was Alta Vista, which actually was doing an acquisition of Zip2, which was Elon Musk's first company. So there was a lot of sort of on the ground and really interesting things that I experienced firsthand. But as a Latino in tech, I also experienced some things that were not fantastic either. So which we can delve into a little bit later. But I would say that my personal journey, my personal experience in this process has been, that I just have a huge love for technology, I have a huge love for design, and that's really what propelled me forward. But I think there's a big discrepancy between the organizations that build the technology and the people that consume the technology. There's a big difference between what those people look like and what the people look like that are building it. And I think that's something where people like us can help further that cause.
Okay. So I just want to go back to something that Stephen said. You are a person of color. Kimberly, you're a double minority, which is a person of color and a woman. And Elena, you are a woman who works in science. Oh, okay, all right. You're a woman who works in science. Have you encountered any obstacles in your history or in your career due to your ethnicity or your gender?
I would say I have, and it's a very odd kind of experience too, because I try to tell the story in a way that makes sense to people that are whatever shade of brown that I am, like the light shade of beige that I might be, because I was raised in Oklahoma. My mother is white, my father is Latino, and I don't speak Spanish. I mean, basically, like, I'm the worst Mexican ever, right? And from my personal experience, the thing is, like, the people that I grew up with, the people that have known me since I was a child, perceive me as one way. They look at me as one way. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm just like every other kid that I grew up with, where I grew up and how I grew up. Outside of that, in the context of my career, I literally went to an interview once and someone said, "Oh, you're here for the janitor position." Right? And I've also had a number of things that have just been along those lines for years and years and years that I've experienced firsthand. And because I have had one set of experiences growing up and then had a radically different set of experiences in my career, I realized very early on that the way that I'm perceived by the people that know me, that the people that I've known for a long time versus people that I've never met on the street before, in a career situation before, is radically different. And I think what my personal experience has been one of more of implicit bias. And by that I mean there's a preconceived idea that most people have when you lay eyes on them for the first time. Right? Now, I'm also from Oklahoma, so I got just straight up like racist shit too, honestly. And you kind of brush it, if that's in your environment, you kind of brush it off like, oh, that's funny. That's kind of okay. But at the end of the day, it's no less significant in terms of the experience. But for me, I would say that was the obstacle. Is like really how do you? For me, it was just about performance. What do I need to do on the job to show that this is the kind of career path that I belong in, right? Because there's so many different little signals, big and small, that say it's not, and have been over the past decade and a half. So from my perspective, it's been some direct, but a lot of just death by a thousand cuts, and finding a way to navigate through that, find allies in that, find the intersectionality between different groups that experience the same things, whether it's women or LGBT, people of color, people over a certain age, people that are normally considered marginalized in the community, and even allies with white guys, like that. I've heard someone say the other day that's like, oh, we really, this isn't about white guys. I'm like, it's all about white guys, actually. We need to have people that understand the value and importance that are in positions of power to be able to open that dialogue and to have that very uncomfortable conversation at some point. But mine has been really more of an implicit bias, I would say, for the most part, and how I've navigated through that is by finding allies, working with people, and being more involved in that community.
Yeah, it sounds like you had to show up and prove yourself simply because of your ethnicity. Like, that's what she said. What do you consider, and I'm posing this to the entire panel, what do you consider to be the most significant barrier to progressing diversity in the tech industry or in the corporate world overall?
So from my perspective, it's three things. It's pipeline, it's a business imperative, and it's the ability to understand culturally why it's important. So I think there's kind of three different things here, right? One is the fact that if you don't see someone like yourself at an organization, you're not going to be attracted to that organization. One, I read a statistic the other day that said something along the lines of 18% of all computer science graduates in the state of California are Hispanic and African American. The total percentage of that same group in tech companies is 5%. So there's a discrepancy of about 13% there for some reason that do not want to work for your company. That's a cultural question, right? The pipeline issue to me really isn't about the number of people that are there, because I would go so far as to say there probably is a percentage of people that are out there in the marketplace that have the skill set to do the work that you need them to do at an organization that does this. There's a disconnect between how are you connecting with those people culturally. I think the second piece is, to Kimberly's point, the business imperative. If you do any statistical analysis around what it means to reach out to groups of people that are considered quote unquote minorities, you're going to find that if you're not looking at a pipeline, a channel, a way to reach out to them, you are losing money, period. There's no way, especially in a state like California, where I think the percentage of people that don't fit the stereotypical formula, it's a big deal, right? And then culturally, it's just, you have to be able to raise this in an organization. If you look at things like the Weinstein issue, Gamergate, the whole rogue engineer from Google who put out his amazing manifesto berating women, and on and on and on. There are people within organizations that fundamentally don't understand how any of this works, and it's imperative upon people that feel that they are a part of this struggle to raise that issue and make it more visible and to put it out there, because if not, it's going to get pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. So I would say those are the three things that are the biggest barriers right now.
Nice. Okay. That also kind of leans into my next question. I think you mentioned like a systematic ignorance of the issue. How are you broaching these conversations, and are you meeting any resistance in those spaces? I know you are, but just talk.
I'm only laughing because it really depends on the audience. As a rule of thumb, in Los Angeles, in the tech community, west of the 405, it's going to be a pretty friendly audience. Now, I've had to give talks at companies in Texas about this, and as you can imagine, different audience. So I really think it's the perception of what it is, and to be honest, if you can make a business case for it, that's going to be a conversation that you can have. But resistance comes in different forms. Mostly, I've worked with a lot of startups over the past few years. A lot of startups are like, yes, we understand it's a problem, but you know what? We've got this budget, this amount of time, and we've got to get a product to market. So it can't be the very first thing that we think about, which is, honestly, it's a valid argument. If you have something that you need to have out, if you have product that you need to push, that first conversation can't necessarily be that. I think if it's in the conversation that you have, it's more part of the decision-making process. So I think it's not direct resistance, but well, in some cases, direct resistance. Again, it's audience is everything. So I don't think a lot of people on the alt-right would necessarily be open to the diversity conversation necessarily. But I do think that the more that you have it in your day-to-day conversations with people in your organization, the easier it is to have to propel forward.
Question. So I just have some stats for you. In terms of management, like the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, 96% of them are white, 2% are African American, 1.2% are Hispanic, and 0.8% are Asian. And then looking at gender, 96% of them are male and 4% are female. So 96% of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies are white men. What do you think the future looks like? Like in 10 years, if these statistics don't change, what does that look like? Or, you know, if we are able to diversify, what does that look like?
Well, I think statistically, the future looks very brown. I think for the state of California, it's, you know, Anglos, white people in the state will be the minority if they aren't already. So I think there is just the reality of the population that's in certain places. I think that from the perspective of getting people from those communities involved in technology, in media, in a space that has been predominantly not been a place where they've been active, I think that it's an all hands on deck exercise of organizations understanding what that process looks like. It's a matter of those organizations also having solid ways of executing that. One of the things that I know that since 2014, when the first numbers came out of LinkedIn and Facebook and all of the big tech companies in Silicon Valley about just the dismal numbers of women and minorities in tech, that over $1 billion has been spent in trying to reconcile that whole experience. And what has happened is it's gone up by about 1%. These are just some of the smartest people in the world that are trying to solve a diversity problem the same way they would solve a tech problem, right? It's not a tech problem, it's a people problem. And tech can support that solution, but at the end of the day, you know, by anybody's estimation, a 1% growth off of a $1 billion investment isn't exactly awesome ROI. So I think the whole perspective needs to change. And what the future of diversity in tech means is to me is that organizations have to wake up and realize that this is a fundamental part of what their business value is, and people that are actively involved in it now need to be even more active because it's imperative upon the survival of them in the process of their careers to do so.
And it looks like they're failing if they're putting in $1 billion and only getting a 1%
Yeah, I would say
return.
that's pretty much failure.
Okay, so our final question, and this is just for you as individuals, as facilitators of change, what do you do from this day forward to create that change, or what can you give to us to take as facilitators of change to do?
Sure, I would say, you know, especially in tech, use the concept of innovation. So take the idea of innovation and start applying it to your organization and how it applies to diversity. I think it's really easy to say, oh, we're going to make this really amazing product and we're going to do things some you know, that no one's ever done before, and you take all your brain power and all your resources to build that thing. But sometimes there's a gap in how do you apply innovation to diversity. So I would just say in your day-to-day life, the way that you do your job and the way that you apply your insight into what you do in your profession, try to take that and apply that to how that works in diversity within your organization, and then it just becomes a baked-in part of the process. I would really, really stress that, because I think sometimes there's just this disconnect when people think, oh, well, you know, I can do this, I can code this, I know I can do this, and I'm really good at it. It's like, if you can make magic like that happen, I'm pretty sure you can run down and find those people on the list to bring in for an interview. You know, it's not rocket science. In fact, it's pretty simple. So I would say use the innovation that you use in your day-to-day lives for your job and apply it to diversity.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to conclude our panel. And just something you said kind of stuck with me. Diversity is the art of thinking independently together. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you, guys.